Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this is August, and we are reading Where Dreams Begin by Lisa Kleypas, which is
Yes,
one of your favorites.
I love this book. I read it a very long time ago. It came out in 2000, and so please be warned that it does some things that the 2024 books do not. Um, but I
Yeah.
really love it, and
If
I
you've
was
ever
so
read an
cool.
old school romance, it's the epitome of one as far as the style of writing and the head hopping POVs and all that kind of stuff, for sure.
Mhm. I was worried a little bit that it was gonna like that the reading experience was not gonna be as like great as I remembered it, but
Yeah.
I still love this book. So
Yeah.
yay.
It's great. I really enjoyed it too.
And Zachary Bronson is kind of like prototypical like industrialist
Oh, yeah.
like hero, and Lisa Kleypas writes a few of those.
Yeah.
And I realize as I think about it that those might be my favorite. Like I love a Harry Rutledge. I love like I Reese Winterbourne. I'm a very big fan of the like scrappy like underdog heroes that are coming up
Right.
in the world. Um, and this is maybe this is the first one I read, and that's why I'm like all hard eyes
Yeah.
for back.
Oh, Zachary. Yes.
So we did start off with Lady Holland Taylor. She is at her first ball. She following her husband's death. He died 3 years ago, and she has gone through like all of the stages of mourning. It's interesting because like in a post like COVID lockdown world, I was like, oh, I get you, girl. She was like, I used to enjoy being around people, but I feel a
I
little.
had the exact same thought when I was reading that. I was like, "Oh man, I understand what you're saying. That would be it's really hard." Yeah.
So yeah, she's been like at home. Like for the first year, she didn't see any people, and then slowly she's starting to see more. And now she's out in a ball. There's people, there's smells, there's stuff going on, and this girl is like, I am starting to have a headache. Like she's kind of trying to back off and sees her brother-in-law. He suggests that maybe she should go to the conservatory and wait while he calls their carriage around to take her back home. And so she does try to find like a dark corner to like hang out in, and unfortunately she bumps into a man who
A
is
very large
also
man.
in a dark corner waiting for.
For a very different reason.
Yeah, yeah. So he's like, finally you come, and like kisses her and stuff, and she's like, what? But
She's
also
like, "Wait,
like
wait, wait." Yeah.
the thing that's interesting is that her husband was like about her height and very like aristocratic in his build, meaning like scrawny, I guess.
Yep. And
But
yeah.
this man is not. He is big and warm and smells nice. And she's just like, oh,
She's like,
you're
"It's been
like,
3 years. This is nice." Yeah.
yeah. She's a little bit like it's like she feels guilty that he's like erasing the last like
His
kiss
last
that was
kiss.
her
Yeah.
husband, and it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, she is like stroking his cheek, and anyway,
Yeah.
and then she's like, "Well, gotta run," and she does what she cries, and he's like, "Oh, you're the sweetest thing I've ever
Yeah.
like
And then
held in
he's
my
like, "Tell
arms
me
with."
your name." And she's like, "Nope, can't.
No,
Gotta
thank
go."
you. She
Well, no,
can't
and
see him.
what he says to her, I remember this vividly because he says after the second time when she kisses him, like he
Hmm.
says, "Should we introduce ourselves?" And she says, "Definitely
Yeah,
not."
yeah.
And I was like, I mean, okay.
She's a very proper lady, but throughout the book, like sometimes she comes up with stuff where you're like, "Oh, okay, you're a little saucy
Yeah.
too." But anyway, so she runs, like she leaves, and then he promptly is like finds the hostess and is like, "Tell me about hang on this lady
About
right over
that
there."
one.
So she was like, I can't see him. Like I don't know. I just know he's big and shadow. Um, is he the like original shadow daddy or whatever?
Right?
She's like rumbly voice, darkness. But
Hmm.
anyway, he is like to the hostess, like, who is this woman? And she basically is like, she's not for you because this is like the most proper of the proper ladies.
Like
She
a
really
true
loved her
proper lady.
husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she actually loved her husband.
Yeah.
She lives with his family still. Like it's I don't think you should be looking in that direction. And
Yeah.
I think he's a little bit of a contrarian because as soon as he's like, okay. And he does send a letter around offering her like to come see
To come to
him.
tea. Yeah.
Um, I guess I'm also that's a little bit skipping ahead because she does come home, her migraine is gone. And she starts having thoughts of like, it's nice that I'm in this house. Like, it's really nice of the family to have like made sure that I'm not destitute. She had to like sell the home that she lived in with her husband
Right.
because what he left her after he died was not
Yeah.
enough to live off of. So
Well, and they
she's
have a young
grateful.
daughter too, that she needed to worry about. So yeah, that made sense to sell the house and move in with his family. And thankfully they were like happy to have her there and her daughter.
But she immediately is already is having thoughts of like, I don't like I don't want to be here forever though.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so when his letter arrives, she's like curious. She doesn't know who he is.
Yeah.
So she's just kind of like, I don't know this guy. And also like, do you know these? And if her
Right.
family is like, this is a bad no, you do not
This
need to be around this
upstart, this
person.
nouveau riche, this blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, one of their acquaintances is like, he only has one trick, and that's making money. And she's kind of like, I mean, okay. Like he
Pretty good trick.
I do like that trick.
Yeah.
So anyway, she does go to see him, even though her
Yeah.
family tries to dissuade her.
Yeah.
Zachary Bronson has already in his head, like, figured out that it's going to take her a few days because the family's going to try to dissuade her. Like, he's
Mhm.
obviously very good at, like, sizing up a situation.
Yeah.
So when she gets there, he you know, is very proper. Acts very much. She's concerned that because once she hears his voice, she is like,
Oh
oh
no, it's him.
no. And
It's him.
yeah. And she's concerned because obviously, but
Yeah.
then she's like, he can't possibly know that I am because why? Like this doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah. Like he's not
he
acting like he knows that it was me, and I'm certainly not going to tell him it was me. So
I mean, she
just
starts
gotta,
to, and then she's like, no.
nope, can't do it. Yep.
Um, but he is concerned because his family, like he's got enough money to enter into these high society circles, but his family doesn't have the like training and the knowledge that is expected of people in those circles.
Right.
He does not seem to care
They
that much
grew up
about
very poor.
himself. And he doesn't seem to care very much about himself.
Yeah.
Um, and like what, if people make fun of him or whatever, but he has a
Right.
younger sister and his mom, and he is like, no, people are going to be making fun of that. So he
Yeah.
wants to
Not if
hire
he can
Lady
do
Holly.
anything about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so he wants to hire Lady Holly to come in and, just give them kind of etiquette lessons and teach them all the like small things that would um make a difference in like how they're perceived.
Yeah.
She interestingly, like he would be even before she comes, he is thinking how like his household staff, like he knows he's hired all these people to like do, and he's like they are not doing the work
Mhm.
like they should be. But
Yeah.
he also like
His,
he's like his mom is never going to ask them to do because
yeah.
she is uncomfortable with that role,
Yeah.
and he
She
doesn't
basically sees herself as below them because she was like like she sold rags and like was a washerwoman, which is like in the hierarchy beneath like a servant that works at a fine house. So like she doesn't feel like she can ask
ask
them
for things.
anything really, much less correct them if they're not doing something right or whatever else. And at her age and everything, he doesn't know that that's ever really going to change. So he needs and I think that's the first thing it says when you're in his POV.
Okay, I
Zachary
need
Bronson needs a wife. Like, yeah.
yeah.
And so he knows that this is like the only way that that's gonna get better.
Yeah, and the truth is that in this chapter, he's not looking at Lady Holland necessarily. Like it doesn't outright say that he's looking like I'm going to marry her,
Right.
but he does feel like he needs certain things because he wants
Yeah.
if he's going to have somebody come into either for himself or his sister. Like if they're going to get married, it better be somebody who's bringing a lot to the table. Like
Right.
he wants a title. He wants someone who's going to be
A
able to think
duke.
about the
Yeah.
house. He wants, yeah, for his sister, like only the best. And so
Yeah.
when he offers Holly this, she's just like, um, she's doing calculations herself, right? Like if I
Hmm.
move into this man's house, people are gonna think things,
Yep.
even if nothing happens, like people are gonna assume stuff that
Yes.
she is uncomfortable with. She's got her daughter to think about. But
Mhm.
then he's like, you
Who
have a
has no
daughter to
dad
think
and no
about.
dowry. Yeah.
But then he is like, you have a daughter to think about. And
Yep.
you don't have money. Like, how is she gonna
Make a good
navigate the
match.
world? How is she gonna
Yep.
make a good match if she doesn't have? And it all makes very good sense to Holly. He
Yep.
initially is like, I'll give you 10,000 pounds if you do this for me for a year. He
Hmm.
calculated he would need a year of lessons to get everything
Right.
sorted. And
Hmm.
she is like, and he's like, I'll throw in a carriage and horses for your daughter when she gets when she gets
Right.
married. And so she kind of starts thinking about it, but then she's like, okay, as she's
Well, and
thinking, he's like 20.
well, I was gonna say at first she's like no, and he's like okay 20, and she's like then she's really thinking about it, and then she's like well I do it for 30, and he's like acts like that's highway robbery, and she's like it's 20 for Rose and 10 for me
Yeah.
because
Well, and
my
he
reputation's gonna take a big hit, and you have to acknowledge that. Yeah,
yes. So she is kind of like, I need to have the kind of money that makes it so my
it doesn't
reputation
matter.
doesn't matter so much.
Yeah,
And so he says, okay, however, you're gonna move in here then. For that kind of money,
right.
you're gonna move
You're
in
gonna
here.
live here. Yeah.
And she's just like, oh no. But they have like a little negotiation. In the end, she's like, all right, I'm doing it.
Hmm.
And when she goes home, it is like the Taylors are horrified and
Yeah.
borderline verbally abusive. Like it's a really difficult scene to me to
It's
see
mostly
them
the
flip.
oldest brother who's now the like title holder after their dad had passed that has a big attitude about this. None of them love
He
it, but he's the one who's mean.
Yeah, and the thing is that he is the loudest voice in the room, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're
And has the
and
most power.
even when you're
Yeah.
reading the scene, she has spent 2 chapters telling us how, like, sweet they are and how accommodating they've been and how nice they've been to her and how but, like, the second that she is no longer, like, oh, like, their brother's wife
Doing the expected
or
thing. Yeah.
acting like their brother's wife, then it's, basically he's basically calling her a whore because he's just saying
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, I didn't know money meant that much to you, and then now you're gonna be like," it's really bleh.
Yeah.
But anyway, instead of making her back off, I think it makes her more like, "Oh, no, I can't stay here." So
Yeah.
she
Well, and like you said before, she was already chafing against the idea of what she would do to not have to stay there forever. And she's already made this choice and he's making her feel worse about it. And she's like, no, we're definitely done here. Like, we're going.
yeah, well, and the truth is that she didn't want to be a burden. Like before, she
Yeah.
didn't want to be a burden to them. But the way that he like flipped a switch like that, I think made her consider that like maybe the way that they feel ownership over her might not be like she doesn't say this in the book,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it does feel very much like she's all of a sudden like, oh, no,
Don't
this is
like
not a
this.
good
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
So, she does, like, move in. Zachary immediately, like, notices that she, like, obviously has had a rough time of it in the last couple
Yeah.
of days, which I thought was really
Hmm.
interesting.
He's
But
very, I mean, you get the impression that part of the reason why he's really good at business is because he can size people up and know things about how they're going to react, what they're going to do, etc. But I feel like he's even more observant of her than he is of anyone. So of course he notices right away that she's like hasn't slept, is not, in a good place, and he's like, "Oh, it was that bad, huh?" Yeah.
yeah, it's really kind of sweet. And then her daughter
Yeah.
Rose obviously pipes up. I know kids sometimes are not, like, fun to have in a
Yeah.
bromance, but this little girl is great because she says all the things that no everyone else is too polite to say.
Yes,
So
100%. She was great for that.
yeah, that she walks in and she has this, like, thing that he's like, "What is that?" And she's like, "Oh, it's my button string." And immediately it's like, "I don't have one of those." And so he's like, "Okay." And he's giving her one of his buttons. Immediately she starts tying it so fast because her
Yeah,
mom is
before her
like,
mom
"That
can be
is
like,
made out of
"No."
gold." And she's like, "Oh."
She's like,
Um,
"Oh, mom's gonna try to take this away. Gotta tie it on right now."
so, but anyway, she's like, "My child does not need to be spoiled." And she says to Zachary, like, "You don't know very much about children." And he goes, "I know how to bribe them." It makes me laugh, but she doesn't really like
Uh,
it because she like doesn't want her daughter to get used to the luxuries
yeah.
of his
Because in
house.
her mind, it's gonna be one small year out of their life, and then they're gonna have to go back to whatever kind of life they're gonna have after that, and she doesn't want
Yeah.
her to get
And even with
attached.
30,000, she doesn't seem like the kind of person who's gonna like be spending like
Right.
big she's not gonna be as big a spender as he is.
Yeah.
When she went to his house originally, she had noticed that like his house was like it's very ostentatious
Oh,
and like
yes.
not necessarily in good taste. Like but honestly, she walks into this like receiving room and it has like a wall that has like butterflies. And I was like,
Like, in the yeah, it's like crystal
I'm
butterflies or whatever, like, in the wall, yeah.
I was like, I want that wall.
I
However,
know.
I know you just said it was gaudy, but it sounds nice.
But it sounds nice, yeah.
But she knows what he's doing with it too,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting and I think surprised him, is that
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, "Your house does its job. It does show people that you have
It says,
arrived."
"Here I am. I'm here." Yeah. Mhm.
And um he was like, "Oh, somebody told me I was in a reviste and I didn't know what that meant, but now I
Yeah.
do." And she just was kind of like, how many times have people done that, like, to try to insult him in,
Yeah.
like, this, like, snide little
In,
way
like, a
that they
sly
don't think
way.
he
Yeah.
gets it. Anyway, she doesn't she it's interesting because as they interact, she is very, like she seems, to appreciate, like, his qualities, and it, like,
Right.
chafes at her the way that how snobby people can be about
Yeah.
him.
Well,
So
and it's
that's
interesting
fun.
too, like from her point of view, starting to realize as she's teaching them all these things about the aristocracy, and they have questions, and she's like, I don't actually know why we do this. It's just like what I was taught. Like that's all I know. And it starts to make her realize that she never really questioned anything about her life or why it was the way that it was, or why other people's lives didn't get to be that way, like why they were better than other people and stuff like that, and it starts to make her question things in a different way than she ever had considered before, because from her point of view, what he's done with his life and the way that he's raised his family out of poverty is way more impressive than anything that some family with 9 generations behind them has done. You know what I mean? So she doesn't
Yeah.
it's like all of a sudden she's having this cognitive dissonance about all that, which I thought was
Yeah,
really
and, like, the friends of the
good.
family are all like, "Our we come from generations of breeding," and she's like, "And that's
Right,
better than, like,
right.
I, like, did this myself." I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know.
and Zachary even says that too at one point. He's thinking about, like, all these people and their generational, like, power, and he's like, "I probably more closely resemble their ancestors who got them this power than they do, and yet they think they're better than me." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a really, like, a through line through the entire story for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and an interesting thing to explore in a story like this because
Yeah,
she she was a person who obviously, like, loved her husband and had a life that she would have been very content to, like, continue in.
yeah,
But now that she doesn't have it, she's making choices that are pulling her in a different direction, and it's really
yeah,
cool to me to watch.
yeah.
Um, let's see. Later her Holly's maid comes up to help her like get dressed for dinner or whatever, and she hears or she tells Holly that the servants are like a whole mess.
Whole
They
mess. Yeah.
don't even really care about doing their job because they don't
Yeah.
think that he knows any better. And it's interesting
Right.
because he does know that they're not doing their jobs.
Yeah. He just
He
doesn't
just
know
hasn't
how to
figured
make
out
them.
how to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in his head he's like, if I fire all these people and hire all new ones, they're gonna also think that I don't know what to
Right.
do and we'll do the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you said, everybody underestimates him in pretty much every way. And he is extremely self-aware and he knows what he doesn't know and he is trying every way he can to like fix that.
Yeah.
So,
She
yeah.
does also though, as she's dressing little Rose, she like she like is pulling her shirt off and is like, also they said that he has these parties here sometimes. And one time he had two women in the bed. He was sleeping with two women at the same time. And
She's like
she's
pulling
like,
her dress off and she's like covering her ears with it at the same time basically and it was hilarious.
and Rose is
Um,
like, help. And
I
so
can't
anyway,
breathe.
they get her dressed. And Holly obviously is like, oh, like I don't want to be around that.
That's not going to be
But
happening
they
while I'm here. Yeah.
no, but they go downstairs, and how about Rose is like,
This is why kids are so good for stuff like this. Exactly like you said. Like nobody else was going to say that out loud, but she did and it was perfect.
yeah. She's
Yeah.
like, why did you sleep with two women at the same time?
Or
And he's just like, sometimes people get sleepy when I have parties.
yep.
Anyway,
I was helping them. Oh
anyway,
god.
Holly is like, we're not
Yep.
going to be helping any women while we are here.
Nope.
So anyway, they Elizabeth and Holly go for walks later, and Elizabeth does kind of like tell Holly a little bit more about their family
Mhm.
and about Zachary himself. Like
Yeah.
he pretty much was taking care of everybody.
Yeah.
Um
From like a very young age.
mhm. And so Holly's kind of admiring of that. Like all those things also make her question, like we were talking about,
Yeah.
some of her own assumptions about the world and people.
Mhm.
Um, anyway, after that, um, their etiquette lessons start
Oh yes.
during breakfast. Because she had told Zachary, like, we're not doing any of this stuff. He was like, are you telling me that all your private times, like, you've never done a thing? And she was like, no. I've thought about it, and no, I have not. She was like, sometimes I'm vain, but that's it, really.
Yeah.
And she's like, and I like cake. If I like cakes, if you put cakes in front of me, I'll eat them all, even though
Yeah.
I know I shouldn't. And he's like,
Yeah.
okay, like grumpy that there's not anything because he
Yeah, that
he
she
was
has
trying to
no
make a point,
skeletons.
and
Yeah.
she was like, no, no skeletons in my closet. So anyway, when they go to the etiquette lesson with Zachary, they bring out uh, she's going to teach him about like all the ranks and like the titles and all the stuff. And
Right.
so the maid brings refreshments, and here's a huge
A
platter.
plate full of cakes.
And she's just like,
And Rose
sir,
is there and she's like, "Ooh, cakes." Like
yeah. She's like, sir, why are you doing this? And he says, I want to see you wrestle with temptation. And I'm just like,
mhm.
oh. Anyway, during this discussion, Zachary Bronson finds out that Holly's husband was only a mister. And
Mhm.
he's like, so why are you Lady Holly? And she's like, oh, I am the daughter of an earl and I retained my title. And he's like, so hypothetically speaking, what would happen if you married like a commoner,
Like
say, like
me.
me? And she's like, I would still be like Holly.
I would still be Lady Holly. And he's like,
And
"You'd be
it's
Lady
just
Holly Bronson?" And she was like, "In theory, yes."
also, I think I need to go now.
Yeah.
But he is like the idea that she already had like married somebody that was not of her
Right, that was
station.
beneath her station. Yeah,
And
mhm.
also, yeah, like, obviously the wheels in his head are turning and she's just like,
Oh, yeah.
"Alright, this lesson's up, goodbye."
And then we're done here, yeah. Well, and so one other thing he convinces her to do, which I thought was really sweet, was let Rose eat at the family dinner table with them.
Yes.
I guess in aristocratic homes, the kids eat in the nursery and it's all, separated and stuff like that, but he's like, "But
Yeah,
there's
he's
no
like,
other kids here." Like,
until
she's
they're old
alone
enough to, like, actually act like
to, like,
proper,
act right. Yeah,
then
mhm,
they are over there where they can be improper by themselves. But yeah,
yeah,
he is like, "But there's no other children here." Like, she'd
yeah.
be sitting by herself.
Just her and the
So,
nanny up in the playroom up in the, kids' room, whatever, eating, and she's like, "Just let her sit at the table," and she's like, "Oh, fine," and of course, Rose is, like, super pumped about this. That was really cute.
it was interesting too that she immediately is like, "Thank you, Mr. Bronson," and he's like, "Thank your mother. I asked the question, but she's the only one." And I felt like
You can decide, yeah.
they already have a dynamic, like, he already knows just what to,
Yes, where to apply the pressure, yep.
it's
For sure, and, it's interesting, that whole dynamic and how the kid does change things between them all the time. Excuse me.
yeah, she is, where kids sometimes seem like they're not really, um, like they're there, but you're like, "Oh, I wish they weren't there." "Oh, are you okay?" "Okay." Um, with Rose, she is like, she's very much central to, like, the reasons why Holly does things, and she the thing is I can't be mad at her because I was this kind of kid that would, like, notice something and just say it, or, like, ask a
Mhm.
question because, like, "I don't understand, why is this going on?" And everyone else is like, stop talking."
Yeah.
Um, but she, like, facilitates some things, complicates some things, and she is very central to, like, everything that motivates Holly to make the decisions that she makes.
And she really loves him, like, right away, which
Mhm.
also influences things with Holly too.
Yeah. And he's
Um,
very good with her and obviously cares about her right away. Like,
yeah.
they have even early on kind of arguments about what is appropriate and like raising a child and like why, like Holly very much is like we don't want to spoil her and he's like why not?
Why? She's a little kid, she deserves some spoiling, yeah.
Yeah.
She's not a tiny adult, she's a child, like, there's a difference, and yeah, she's like, and all those aristocrats, like, they don't even raise their own kids, so they have no idea what they're like, that's why they, like, think they know, what to do with the kid, it's like, they don't know anything, they don't even raise their own kids, so, yeah, that was interesting, like, byplay between them for sure. And I
Yeah.
think that pretty much leads us to the end
That's
of chapter
chapter 6.
6. Yep.
Mhm.
So, all right, guys, we will be back next week with the middle part of this story, and we hope to see you then.
See you then.